So as we've discussed quite a bit recently, thousands of immigrant children have crossed the border coming from Guatemala, Honduras, and other Central American places up through Mexico. And they've been met by angry conservative protesters and, unfortunately, a Democratic president more than willing to fast-track their deportations. Well, today, news broke that there are consequences to doing that and implementing that policy. Quote, between 5 and 10 migrant children have been killed since February after the United States deported them back to Honduras, a morgue director told the Los Angeles Times. They continue, San Pedro Sula morgue director Hector Hernandez told the LA Times that his morgue has taken in 42 dead children since February. According to an interview with relatives by the LA Times, one teenager was shot dead hours after getting deported. So they go on to explain that when we deport these kids, we are literally deporting them to the murder capital of the world. Now, that should be stunning because that proves and that shows you there's a difference between somebody who's an immigrant and somebody who's a refugee. And if you actually go by the amount of violence and the amount of crime in a region, which in spirit is what we're talking about when we mention refugees, then by any standard, these kids are refugees, and they're actually coming here to get political asylum. So the violence in the countries that they're leaving due to the drug war, it's worse than Iraq at the height of the Iraq war. Vox had a great article on that a few months back, and I was just as stunned as anybody else to learn that. I follow politics as closely as anybody, and even I was like, really? Is that the case? Guatemala and Honduras are more violent than fucking Iraq at the height of the war? But it turns out that it's true. And here's the most incredible part of the story. Quote, both the U.S. and Honduras governments have allocated funds to help repatriated immigrants stay in Honduras. In June, the White House stated that it would devote $18.5 million to support community policing and law enforcement efforts to confront gangs and other sources of crime. So I have an idea. How about you use that $18.5 million to help the refugees stay here? Instead of spending $18.5 million, I mean, if the whole idea is you want fiscal responsibility, why not spend the same amount of money but do it to make sure they don't die and they can stay in the U.S.? But no, you want to spend $18.5 million to force them to stay there. And then also, you could do this crazy thing called you don't have to spend anything. You could actually save money by just stopping the drug war, and then overnight you make those countries much less violent. See, what people don't understand is when it comes to prohibition against cocaine and marijuana and other drugs, it's no different than prohibition against alcohol. So when you had prohibition against alcohol, what was the result? Well, you shoved the alcohol market underground, and then only criminals would sell it, and criminal enterprises became incredibly powerful. Like, for example, the mafia. The mafia became so strong as a result of prohibition. And then when you give them all this power, well, they don't, when there's a problem to resolve in the black market, you don't solve it in court with suits and ties on, you solve it with Tommy guns and drive-bys. Well, the same thing is true when you make marijuana illegal and cocaine illegal and these other drugs that are coming from Mexico or coming from Central America. The result is you've given the cartels a monopoly, and then the cartels become incredibly powerful because instead of legalizing it and making CVS get profits off of marijuana or Walgreens or some random Joe Schmo pharmaceutical company, now you make it so that people who behead people in the middle of the street in Mexico or people from Colombia who are drug lords get all the money and they're massively rich, and then they terrorize and police the communities and they kill innocent kids. And then the fucked up thing is when those kids try to come here to create a decent life, we kick them right back out and say, no, go back down to your hellhole, which is worse than Iraq. Look, there are consequences to U.S. policy, and at least in this respect, we're doing everything wrong. We could not be more wrong. We're wrong on every front. We're wrong in terms of the drug war. We're wrong in terms of immigration policy. We're wrong in every way. What we need to do is, yes, do amnesty for the people that are here. I have no problem with doing border protection. You can do border protection. I'd like it if you do border protection. But do amnesty, set up a system where people can become legal immigrants, and at the same time end the drug war and allow law-abiding companies to make money off of it as opposed to the cartels, which are killing the people that we deport.